I'm especially excited about today's video. I'm going to reveal kind of a secret brush that I like to use for a perfectly beautifully blended sky, somewhat like you see here. So we're going to go over a sunset sky. We're going to do a silhouette of trees and then finish it off with a lake and its reflection from the sky. I'm using cadmium yellow deep, Grumbacher red, ultramarine blue, and I'm adding raw sienna to each of those. Raw sienna is a light brown, and yellow ochre would also work in its place here. It's just toning down the brightness of those primary colors. And then I'm going to add some titanium white. The most important element in getting a perfect blend in this is to use one of these brushes. This is actually a makeup brush. It's called a Kabuki blender brush, and this one in particular is made by e.l.f. Eyes, Lips, Face. You can find it in any drugstore, and this brush is magic for blending. I like to mix my colors to create my secondary colors instead of buying orange. I prefer just to mix red and yellow. But feel free to use orange instead of mixing here. Complete personal preference. So there's a little bit of dampness on my brush. I always dip it in the water and then dry it off on a paper towel so that it's damp. You don't want it dripping with water. And the goal of the first layer is to just put paint to canvas, covering up the white of the canvas, getting a vague idea of what colors we're going to be using. A sunset will often have darker, warmer, more intense colors than a sunrise. Now it's easier to blend the lights into the darks than to try to blend the darks into the lights. So we're going to start doing several layers from the center, the yellow center, and then moving up and out. And we're going to repeat that pattern as many times as we need to until we get the blend that we're looking for. As you know, acrylics dry quite quickly, so it's important in order to blend, both colors need to be wet. So you need to work and blend quite quickly so that they don't dry on you. Sometimes it can feel a little bit tacky. If the brush is kind of getting sticky and tacky, then you need to take a break and let it completely dry. Give it 5 minutes, let it dry, and then try it again, because you're not going to win that battle. If the canvas is too wet, the white will show through. The canvas underneath, the white of the canvas will show through. But if the canvas is too dry, or the paint is too dry, the paint will start to pull off. So you kind of need to be aware of what the problem might be. Which one, either too little paint, too much paint. It should glide nice and smoothly. It should be right in the middle. It's possible to get to a point where you're putting on too much paint and then the paint will just stop adhering to the canvas at some point, but that's talking about layers, 8, 9, 10. So as long as you're staying below that, I'm sure you're fine. It should be blending nicely. And then of course you need to clean your brush between, I know you can't see on the screen, but my brush is being cleaned before I start in with the yellow every time. You don't want to pull the purple or red back into that bright, pretty yellow. And these brushes are quite inexpensive. It might be nice to grab a couple if that's possible. When the sky is starting to look airbrushed and the hard edges are disappearing, that means that you're getting close to your finished sunset sky. The last step is adding a sun in the middle. I like to use my pinky finger. I'm dipping it into the titanium white. You can also use a round circular brush. And then we are blending outward. We're still wet on wet here. That paint, that yellow paint is still wet, so that's why it's blending so nicely. And then you just keep layering on your sun until you get the desired brightness that you like. Using our sunset canvas, I'll demonstrate maple trees in the distance. Have some black here and the leftover colors from the sunset. We're going to be using this large, stiff bristled flat brush. It's the same brush that we used for the single maple tree that was painted up close. And we'll use this angle brush to throw in a few pine trees as well. So we're going to start with a red-orange color with our stiff bristled brush here. And we're going to work some maples in the distance around the sun. So they absorbing color from the sunset. And we're just changing up the form and the shape of the trees in the distance. We don't want them to be replicated, so we will twist our brush up and down and side to side, making sure that the forms look different from each other. Different sizes and shapes of trees. And then with our angle brush, it'll give us a nice sharp line if we want to throw in a few pine trees back there. Just to change it up a little bit. And once that dries, after a minute or two, we'll go in with our straight black and start laying in the foundation for those trees in the same manner. Grab the corner of that brush and tap, tap, tap. There's very little detail. These trees are quite a distance away, so we don't need any detail. But we do want that little bit of texture that shows us that they are in fact trees. And towards the horizon line, it will be pretty thick with paint. You can see that the trees along the edges are taller. That's just more pleasing to the eye. It also looks like the trees on the edges are closer to us, and then it automatically gives shape to what will be the lake, the bottom half of the canvas. We want the black to completely dry, and then we'll go in with, I have this little blender brush. It's quite small, and I am going to use that. You can use any blender brush. And I'm adding it to the trees that the sun would be hitting as it's sinking into the horizon line there. It's going to be hitting a few more of those trees, so I'm kind of extending that color, that red-orange color, a little bit farther down. And this is a dry brush. We don't need any water here. And there's a finished tree line, and you can see the rest of the completed painting in the lake reflection demo. For the lake reflection painting, we're going to start with this blender brush. Just like we did in the sky, we're going to be doing the exact same thing in the reflection of the water. So if you need to refer to the sunset sky painting, you can do that. We are pretending like we are folding the canvas in half, and it should look very similar as you can get it. So the reflection is dry, and I'm taking my brush, my stiff bristled brush, and I am just fixing the parts of the lower parts of the tree that I painted over with the lake. Just using a straight black here, and I'm not being too careful because the next thing I'm going to do is pull the reflection from those maples in the distance. I'm going to pull them straight down into the water. So I've got a clean palette over here, and I'm going to mix a dark gray. This is the part that often gets skipped over. Our dark maples are going to appear slightly lighter in the reflected water. I do want to see a difference between the black in the trees and the black in the water. So there, just by adding a little bit of white, it's going to show just enough distinction between the two. And that's what we're looking for. It's going to make a big difference in the final look. So dark objects appear lighter in water, lighter objects appear darker in the water. And we're just bringing those shapes straight down. This is very calm, still water. This doesn't have to be exact. Try to get it as close as you can, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Our eye will be able to recognize that it's supposed to be a reflection. And we'll want to take our angle brush and make those sharp lines for the pines. And now for the water. So the reflection is going to be reflected a little bit darker in the water. So I have here an ultramarine blue mixed with a little bit of brown. And I have a large blender brush. And I'm going to create a wash with this color. And a wash is adding quite a bit of water. It treats it like a watercolor. And I am going over the entire lower part of the canvas where the water is. Make sure everything is completely dry before you do a wash, or else it will smear around. We don't want that. So a sky will be reflected a little bit darker in the reflection, and it's going to be added to the local color of the water. So it's going to add a little touch of blue to the lake water color to distinguish the top from the bottom. And here we are with our angle brush again. I have light blue color here, and I am distinguishing the land from the water, keeping my lines going left to right, nice and straight. And then I'll add a few in the water itself. It's very still water, but it may have a few ripples here and there. That's just going to add to the realism. And don't overdo it with our left to right lines. It's easy to overdo it. Just keep it nice and simple. And there's our lake reflection.